Okay, and
Yeah.
this morning?
This morning, we had the honor to start the morning with Terry Real. Terry we had a chance to meet you personally at one event you organized, Radiant Intimacy, a couple of years ago. It was such a joy to have you around, not only for your knowledge, but also for your personality, for your spirit and your personality. You are fun, irreverent, super intelligent, and you know our shit. Literally.
And you have done your work, your deep spiritual work. That's one I want to say.
Another layer to add to the pie. So let me read first the real introduction. Then Terry, you can unmute yourself and we start talking because you're muted. So Terry Real is a nationally recognized family therapist, speaker, and author, particularly known for his groundbreaking work on men, on gender, and couples. He has been in private practice for 30 years and is the founder of the Relational Life Institute, which is dedicated to teaching the general public how to live relational lives and to teaching mental health professionals the practice of relational life therapy, RLT. Terry, such an honor to have you with us again. I'm delighted.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to see both of you again.
Likewise, Terry. And we want to open with a little bit of a general question that we have been asking all of our presenters. And this crisis is almost like a magnifier for us. Magnifier in terms of our personal lives, in terms of our collective lives. And so what are some of your reflections about the challenges and opportunities in terms of the relational realm that this crisis is bringing to our lives?
Well, you're absolutely right, Zaya. It is an amplifier, it's a magnifier. And my experience talking to people really around the world, clients around the world, is that it goes both ways. On the one hand, obviously it magnifies all the frictions and the fault lines and the cracks in the relationship. On the other hand, enforced isolation has brought us to a higher level of consciousness in that we never have appreciated or held more preciously the value of connection. So if you're having Zoom soirees or if you're social distancing with a running partner, we had one of my kids' birthdays by Zoom. People are conscientiously reaching out to one another, I think in ways that are new and exciting. As a culture, we're a lonely culture. The Surgeon General just came out with a new book, a former Surgeon General called Together, about the epidemic of loneliness. We have a pandemic of loneliness along with this pandemic. And I think people have been forced to rely on one another in new ways. Men in particular, I have found, relieved of the burden of commuting back and forth to work and expectations of being on the rat race, being a little more let down, are spending time with their families, sitting around playing board games, actually helping with the dishes. And what they find is that they like it. Connection feels good to us human beings. And so I think along with the frictions, we can talk about that, there is also something very, it's weird to say, but rather beautiful about being more connected, being in our families 24/7, and particularly working men and some high-powered working women stepping off the rat race a bit and enjoying themselves, being more available and enjoying that relationality that they've stepped into. So enforced loneliness has contradictorily bred a high value on the opposite of loneliness, on connection, both in our homes and outside.
Can I make one little disclaimer? I just want to make sure when we talk about relationship, we are not talking about heterosexual relationship per se, just to be clear. We are covering all the spectrum of relationship. No, I just want to make, for the audience, to make sure we are clear on that. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And same-sex couples have families. You know, when I speak about a family, I'm not necessarily assuming it's heteronormative. There's all sorts of variations out in the world. So, yes.
Yeah. And also, when we speak about masculine and feminine, I want to make sure we're speaking about principles, not men and women necessary.
Yeah, let me say something about that, Zaya.
Yeah.
You know that for 30 years now, I've been speaking about patriarchy and speaking against the system of patriarchy. And we can talk about what that does to us psychologically. But when I speak, I'm not an essentialist. I don't believe in the masculine energy and the feminine energy, and I don't buy any of that stuff. Masculinity and femininity is what we define as masculine and feminine in our culture, to great cost to boys and girls and men and women in the culture. I'm sure we're going to be talking more about that.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah. What do you see are some of the biggest challenges for modern couples? Like, what have we misunderstood about intimacy or relationships? Why our relationships have become so complex?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of things. One is we've never expected more from dyadic sexual intimate relationships than we have now. The idea of a long-term marriage being truly intimate is a brand new idea. It's not even the current idea a couple generations back, let alone throughout history. Throughout history, marriage has been about companionship and stability. Now we want to be lifelong lovers in our relationship. We want long walks on the beach. We want heart-to-heart talks. We want great sex into our 60s and 70s and beyond. We really want to be lifelong lovers. That is a new ambition. And our culture simply has not taught us men and women, boys and girls, the skills that we need to pull that off. So we have very high ambition and relatively primitive skills. And there's a disparity then between what we want and what we get. And that disparity sticks in the crawl for both men and women. You know, we used to have whole villages that supported a marriage, and in some places that's still true. But in modern developed countries, that's not true. We ask of one another what we used to ask of aunts, uncles, chiefs, you know, the whole context that we lived in. So the demands have never been higher. The skills are not greater. And the discrepancy between those two leads to a lot of unhappy people. That's one. Two is, when I talk about the brand new ambition of being lifelong lovers, heart-to-heart talks, real intimacy into our old age. When I say we want that, a little more precise description would be women want that. Women are leading the fore. And the great story of the 20th century has been the changing role of women. Women have been empowered in all sorts of ways, new ways. And newly empowered, having their own jobs, their own money, they need more from marriage than just a paycheck. And so across the board, I believe in heterosexual relationships, women are asking more emotional intimacy from men than we have raised boys and men to deliver. There's a real asymmetry. You know, if the story of the 20th century has been the changing role of women, perhaps the story of the 21st century is going to be how men deal with that changing role. Because it's really quite a revolution. A lot of men, most men, are good-hearted. I call them good-hearted and bewildered. They really would like to please their partners, but they simply don't know what this emotional intimacy stuff really looks like. Now, that's different based on the age. Baby boomers are terrible. Millennial men are pretty good, getting better. You know, millennial men have been raised by a generation of feminist women. And by and large, they're a more gender progressive group than this planet's ever seen before. So I have great faith in our youth, in millennial men, but even they lack the skills you need to pull this off.
So what would you say are some of the key skills for us to be in an intimate relationships? What are the
You know, the
basic?
first skill is in your heart. The first skill is in your mind and your soul. It isn't anything you do. It's what you do inside. I speak to the couples I work with about what I call remembering love. Remembering that the person you're speaking to is someone you care about and that it's in your interest to be there. Now, I'm just starting a new book, writing a new book, and the title is Us, the Power of Moving Beyond Me and You. And our normal consciousness is me and you consciousness. It's a win-lose game. You know, for example, and I want people to think about the whole. Us consciousness is synonymous with relational consciousness, is synonymous with thinking ecologically. The essential mistake of patriarchy and of individualism is it's a power control model. It's a domination model. You know, back in King James version of Adam and Eve anyway, God gives man dominion over all the things that creep and crawl on the earth. That's a really bad idea. We're not above nature, controlling it, whether the nature we're talking about is the planet or our children or our partners. We're not above and in control of much of anything. We have to have the wisdom and the humility of understanding that we're in nature, that we breathe it, that we're a subcomponent part, we're not the masters. So when you think about that in terms of relationships, your relationship is your biosphere. It's the context in which you live. It's what you depend upon. And you can choose to indulge yourself and, you know, pollute your biosphere over here with anger and rage, but you'll breathe that pollution in over here in your partner's withdrawal and resentment. We are connected. We are not disconnected from each other. There is no such thing as a freestanding individual. That's a myth. We co-regulate each other's nervous systems, from mothers to children to infants, all the way up to partners who live together. We co-regulate each other. If you want to take a look at what happens, a truly freestanding individual, take a look at what happens to somebody in solitary confinement. They go mad. We are social animals. We are born to connect. Now, when you start thinking about the wisdom of the relationship, instead of you and me as adversaries, all sorts of things change. For example, I say the relational answer to the question, who's right and who's wrong, is who cares? It doesn't matter. What matters is how are you and I going to get through this thing in a way that works for both of us? That's what matters. So when you think relationally, if one of you wins and the other one loses, you both lose. And that's not pie in the sky idealism. You will lose if you win because the loser will make you pay for it, either overtly or covertly. You are not freestanding. You are inside this biosphere. So I don't talk to people about giving in to one another or compromise. You don't make compromises to each other. You make more skilled moves to protect and keep whole and healthy this third force called your relationship. That's what you're devoted to. It's not a zero-sum win-lose game. When you start thinking like that, all sorts of things become possible.
And I heard you say that, you know, in relationship, forget about objectivity. Who cares?
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
that
What I ask people, I ask people, the couples that I work with, to swallow a few bitter pills. And the first one is objective reality has no place in personal relationships. It's great for making trains run on time, but it sucks in terms of trying to sort that who's right and who's wrong, who's valid, who's not valid, who remembers it the way it really was. I call these objectivity battles. And it's like a dog chasing its own tail. It goes on forever and ever and ever. But people argue about this all day long. It was this, it wasn't that. You were this, you weren't that. I don't care. What matters is how are we going to negotiate this in a way that's going to work for us? How are we going to negotiate each other's subjective realities with compassion? Over and over again, I teach people in general, and this is particularly true for men, to change their point of reference. So your partner is unhappy with you about blah, 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 blah. The first reference that we go to is, is that accurate? Your partner's sitting there either angry or sad about something you did, and your first thought is that true or not? Like you become a scientist. Like, who cares? Your first thought, and then your second thought is you. Oh my God, I can't believe I have to put up with this bullshit again. So those are the two things we think about first. Mauricio's falling off the couch.
Stop talking about me. Stop talking about me.
I am talking about you. Maurice, you didn't know, but this is basically a couple's intervention that I've been asked to do. Anyway, listen, get over yourself. As my kids say, get over yourself. It's not about you. And lose objective reality. Nobody gives a damn. And replace that, and this takes discipline, replace that with a compassionate listening to your partner's experience. That does the job. It's not about whether it's true. It's not about you. Your partner is hurting. Now listen, it's in your interest to help your partner get happy again. Why is it in your interest? Ready? Because you live there, stupid. You're going to deal with the consequences of their unhappiness. So I don't talk to people about altruism. I talk about enlightened self-interest. It's in your interest to make this work with your partner, A, because you love them, but even leaving that aside, B, because you have to live with them. You're not outside of the system, you're within it.
Now, that sounds like a beautiful theory, but when I'm in my reaction, when I'm in trauma and I'm the little one feeling abandoned, there's no way I can access that generous heart and loving heart. I'm just, protecting. So what are some of the tools when we are actually in trauma response, when we are not in the moment, we are really reacting from the past? When I'm reacting from the past, how can I still have love for my partner?
Yes, I'm currently teaching a course with a German mystic, Thomas Ubel. Many of you may know him. He now lives in Tel Aviv. And he talks a lot about the gift of presence to your partner. And one of the things I was thinking as I was listening to him talk in the class was, you can't give presence if you're not in the present. Let me say that again. You can't be present if you're not in the present. And what happens with trauma triggering, the first thing before I move to tools is, let's understand what the hell's going on in that moment. From a relational perspective, from an us perspective, the first and most important question I ask as I'm doing work with a couple is this one. I don't care about the stressors. Look, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're all stressed. I don't even care about the dynamic between you, the choreography, although that's very critical. The most important question is this one. Which part of you am I speaking to? Which part of you am I speaking to? Am I speaking to the prefrontal cortex? Am I speaking to the adult? We call it the functional adult part of you, present-based, non-triggered, mature, able to receive. Or am I speaking to the triggered part of you, which in my work we speak of as the adaptive child part of you, the part of you that adapted. And or even further back to the wounded child who feels so abandoned. If you are not, here's the bad news. You ready?
I'm ready. Bring it on.
I don't know if I am.
When you're in your wounded child or adaptive child, the reason why I backed up rather than launch into skills is this one. Here's another bitter pill. The wounded child and adaptive child have no interest in using any of these skills. I do a workshop around the country, and one of my favorite slides in the whole workshop is other workshops teach you skills. We deal with the part of you that won't use them. You don't care. The adaptive child part of us is not interested in being skilled. It's interested in whatever, being right or control or I talk about 5 losing strategies. Being right, controlling your partner, unbridled self-expression, venting, getting it off your chest, throwing in the kitchen sink, unbridled self-expression, retaliation, and withdrawal. That's the agenda of your adaptive child, is some combination of those. So I'm not going to give you your adaptive child skills to use. They won't use it. So the first skill, I call it the proto skill, the skill, the one that comes before all others, is the skill of shifting out of the wound, out of the immature part of you, back into the non-traumatized adult part of you. Now, we do this, or I could say it differently. It's about bringing the adult part of you into relationship with these children, these orphan children inside, so they're no longer orphaned. You know, one of the things I say is maturity comes when we take care of our inner children and don't foist them off on our partners to take care of. Did you lose me? You want me to say that again?
Say it again.
Maturity comes when we take care of our inner children and don't foist them off on our partners to take care of. So if little Zaya is feeling abandoned, and adaptive Zaya moves from that abandonment to either desperate pursuit or angry, rageful pursuit. The adaptive part of you could go either way. It's your job to look at your partner and go, excuse me, I need a moment or more. I'm a big fan of people taking breaks. So you can recenter yourself, if it's not too bad, in the moment while you're standing there. You can breathe and come back into your functional adult. One of the things I say is that in those heated moments, our breath is our friend and urgency is our enemy. Let me say that again. In those heated moments, our breath is our friend. Urgency is our enemy. So slow down. Take a break. And if you need to remove yourself for a while, do it. But don't come back into the fray until you're recentered, you're grown-up Zaya, maybe with little Zaya in your back pocket. But grown-up Zaya is the one who's going to deal with Mauricio. You know, I say to my clients, I have a little, when Belinda, my wife, is coming at me with, say, anger, I'll take little Terry. I know him very well. I have a composite. He's about 8 years old. I take little Terry and I put him behind me, behind my big back. He can hold on to my shirt and be safe. And I make a deal with little Terry. I say to him, hey, look, You don't have to deal with the blast of energy that's coming at us. I will. It'll stop with me, like Superman with his cape. The explosion stops right here. Back there, you're safe. That's my part of the bargain. Now, little Terry, let me tell you your part of the bargain. You don't deal with Belinda. You let me deal with Belinda. I can do it a lot better than you can. So when an inner child kicks up, I like to say you want to put your arms around them and put them in your lap. You want to hear what they have to say with empathy and love. And you want to take their sticky hands off the steering wheel. They're not driving the bus, you are. And I call this shift from adaptive child into functional adult relational mindfulness. Relational mindfulness is bringing the same art of meditation, the same art of mindfulness that we use in other parts of our life into our relationships. Which part of me is speaking right now? And does that little boy need some attention from me? Not from Belinda, but from me. I'm the container. Does this make sense to you?
Oh my God, it brought me to tears. I mean, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, this is really the deepest spiritual practice that we, and what you're talking about is that's our own work. This is my work of becoming intimate with the little one in me and building relationship and understanding the wounds. And what you're describing is really the advanced healing of the wounds in which.
That's right. And I do it in a deep way in my office. So in my office, I would have you, I would say to you, Zaya, that abandoned part of you, that child, that little girl who's so wounded, how old are you? In fact, yeah, go ahead. How old are you?
I would say 3.
Uh-huh. And you can pass on any of this, but let me, when you think of her, what is she doing? What does she look like?
What I see, yeah, she's afraid. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, she feels alone. She feels like the world is gone. So
Well,
she's alone.
because no doubt because she was alone, and I would move into your family of origin and get her story. Then I would say, and I don't think we're going to do it now, but then I would say, I would like to meet that little girl. Will you ask her to come up out of your body and sit in an imaginary chair so you can speak to her? And then I would say, what do you want to say to her? And what does she want to say to you? And the ultimate punchline would come way down the pike, maybe an hour or so into this dialogue. I would say to you, Zaya, do you feel big enough and strong enough to care for this little girl? Do you?
Now, yes. It
So
has
I would
taken
have,
many years.
it's been a journey.
Yeah,
Yeah. But you do feel big enough and strong enough to care for her.
absolutely.
And I would have you look at this little 3-year-old Zaya, and I would have you say, hold on, I'm getting that. I would have you say, I'm here. You're not alone. You never have to be alone again. I will take care of you. How's that feel? It's a blessing.
It's a blessing. It's heart opening and warming. And there's still also the residue of mistrust.
That's your adaptive child. That's an older Zaya. 5, 6, usually up to teenage 20s. That's the part of you that grouped around that wound and adapted as best you could in it. So you learned to mistrust that people would be there, and you learn to take care of yourself. And it's like, screw you if you want to get close to me. Nobody gets close to me. I don't trust closeness. And that way you have adapted to the wound. And one of the things I say is, I got this from Thomas too a little bit. One of the things I say is to my therapist students, to all the healers who are listening to this, please respect the exquisite intelligence of that adaptive child. When you evolved a kind of a crust around that wound and grew mistrustful and skeptical that anybody would be there, that's exactly what you needed to do. That was really smart. But I have a saying, adaptive then, maladaptive now. Adaptive then, maladaptive now. So now it's time to reach to your functional adult beyond both of these children. And that functional adult needs to say to the adaptive Zaya, if I may, calm down and open up. It's going to be okay. And that adaptive child, that functional adult needs to say to little 3-year-old Zaya, I've got you, and I'll always have you. Then, and only then, are you ready to turn to Mauricio and say, okay, buddy, let's deal. Yeah. That's how it works.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry, for breaking this down and helping me see that so clearly. One thing that has made a big difference in our relationship is learning vulnerability. And also for me, it's like, there's no you. Like really letting go of the you. That has been one of the hardest practices.
What do you mean by letting go of the you?
There is a letting go of the you. I feel this way because of you, or you did this and that's why so the you, the pointing finger, that was a huge trigger for both of us. We were constantly in a state of pointing fingers, and that was exhausting.
Yeah, blame and boundary failure, I would say. You're responsible for my unhappiness, you dog. Now listen, people who work with relationships all over the world tell people not to use you talk. You're this, you're that. Good that you've learned that. If I may, I want to push it even a little bit further. I teach couples not to use it talk either. It was this, it wasn't that. This happened, that didn't happen. This is appropriate, that's not appropriate. I don't want you to be the voice of reality. I don't want you to be the authority on what this is or isn't. And so you speak scrupulously subjectively. This is what I experienced. This is how I remember it. These are what my feelings were. And the very critical fourth part that everybody leaves out, this is what you could do right now to help me feel better. This is what repair looks like. And at some point, I hope we speak a bit about the repair process.
Yeah, that's exactly actually one of our questions.
That's the next question I wanted to raise, because
yes, just before we move to the repair, I was wondering, like, often I feel like I can't ask. Maybe that's my controlling nature, is like, can I even ask him that I need that? Like, I'm still caught in taking care of him, so I cannot ask what my needs are. If you can say something around that pattern.
Yeah, first of all, that's a woman speaking. There might be men who have that constellation, but for every man who has that, I don't have the right, I'll upset him, I have to take care of him. You know, the whole work around women's psychology has been about refinding your voice. That's Carol Gilligan, a colleague, a friend of mine. And whenever you hear a woman's voice, that's Carol. She's the one who came up with that. She wrote a book back in the 80s called In a Different Voice. which really launched a lot of this. Anyway, it's about power. It's about empowerment and not caretaking and having the right. For years, people have said that women don't have voice in relationship. Let me tell you, neither sex has voice in relationship. Women don't ask for what they want because a good woman should take care of her partner and not have any wants. Men, whether it's a heterosexual relationship or whether it's a same-sex relationship or what have you, men don't have voice in their relationship. They do not have the right to speak up for what they want and need, other than sex, what they want and need, because a strong man it doesn't have any wants or needs. He's Superman. So right off the bat, for you to identify what it is you want, and by the way, I would say what you want, not what you need. Need is a demand word. Want is a negotiation word. For you to identify what it is you want and put that out is an act of courage for many women. And if he gets upset, screw him. He gets upset. I'm sorry. You'll deal with it. I call this letting the bad thing happen. Let it happen, and then deal with it and move with it. But don't back off of healthy things because you're afraid of your partner's unhealthy reaction. Let me say that again. This is really critical for women. Don't back off of a healthy assertion because you fear your partner's unhealthy response. Find a way to speak your mind. And if the son of a gun is such a bully that every time, no matter how skilled you are, you speak your mind, he blows up, well, that's a sign for couples therapy. Now, having said that, let me say this. There are ways of speaking and there are ways of speaking. And so, particularly for women, what I'm working on right now is what I call soft power. Soft power. Cherishing power. You see, under patriarchy, you can be connected or you can be powerful, but you can't be both at the same time. Because power is dominance. Power is power over. If you're powerful, you lose the connection. So you have affiliation connection, that's quote unquote feminine. You have independence and power, that's quote unquote masculine. But you can't do both at the same time. If you do both at the same time, I speak to women about loving power, cherishing power. That breaks the back of patriarchy. You have now moved beyond what this culture gives you. You're a superwoman. Now, what does that sound like? It sounds like standing up for yourself with love. Standing up for yourself with love. Cherishing your partner and cherishing the relationship at the same time that you set a limit or speak your mind. Can I give you an example?
Absolutely, please.
One of the couples who taught me this was a heterosexual couple. And it was one of these classic heterosexual deals. She wanted sex none of the time. He wanted sex all the time. And they were ready to kill each other, a young couple. So I got them off of action level and I got them speaking to what was going on inside of them, what it meant. And unfortunately, like a lot of men in our culture, sex was the only place this guy could be vulnerable. Sex was meant he was connected. Sex meant that he was desired. Sex meant that she wasn't mad at him. It meant all these he filtered all of his emotional needs through the physical act of sex. Once he said that, the atmosphere changed. And they came back 2 weeks later and they said, we solved it. And they did. They had other problems, but they solved this one. They said, okay, there's a story. What happened? They said the next time he wanted sex, his wife, instead of withdrawing or getting mad at him, which is what she used to do, walked over to him and gave him a big kiss, looked him in the eye and said the following, honey, you are hot. You are so handsome and so desirable. I love making love to you when we make love. You're a nice man. You've got a good heart. I've never felt closer to you than I feel right now. Oh, by the way, no sex tonight. And the man reported saying this. You want to see it again? He was so disarmed. This is a true story. He felt so cherished in love that hearing the no didn't erupt in a volcano the way it had all the other times. That's what I mean by cherishing your partner and standing up for yourself in the same breath. It's the difference between saying, I'll pick on Mauricio, I don't like how you're speaking to me right now, and saying, Mauricio, I want to hear you. Could you do me a favor and tone it down so I can really hear what you're saying? Two different ways of saying the same thing. But one honors the connection, and the other one is individualistic, me versus you. Moving into the us unlocks all of that.
And the power of honesty, you're speaking that as well.
Yes, I speak of fierce intimacy. If you want your relationship to stay passionate and alive and juicy, take each other on. Don't let things fester. Don't compromise. Most compromise is bullshit. You say you're compromising, but you really resent the hell out of it. Take each other on and tell each other the truth. When you stop telling each other the truth, the first casualty is passion. But most people stop because they're not skilled enough to work through how to tell each other the truth and resolve it in any way. So they have to learn how to do that.
Beautiful.
I was seeing in the chat. So again, we are talking in this case specifically about the heterosexual couple for the fact that the two of us are here. And by the way, we are not as straight as people can see if they know us, but that's a different story. We want to make sure we're talking about relationship in every aspect. It's just, again, LGBTQ.
I'll tell you what, let me say a word about same-sex couples. Just a word. There are two things that a therapist, a healer has to remember about same-sex couples, paramount. The first is that even though it's much better these days, thank God, I have a gay son and he's in New York and, he feels welcome and loved. I don't know if he would feel welcome and loved in other parts of the country, but things are changing. Nevertheless, you're dealing with an oppressed minority. And oppression has consequences. So when I'm dealing with a same-sex couple, when I'm dealing with a gay or lesbian man or woman, I'm very interested in their coming out story. I'm very interested in the process by which they began to know and deal with their own gayness, how that happened for them. That's a big part of their autobiography. And it will teach you something about how they stand in relationship to their own gayness now. The second thing is when you're dealing with same-sex couples, are you ready for this? You're dealing with two men or two women, unless there's gender fluidity or you're talking about a trans. But generally speaking, you're dealing with two men and two women. Straight therapists have this fantasy that if you're gay or lesbian, you have broken out of the patriarchal mold. I wish it were true, but that's wishful thinking. So when I'm working with two gay men, it's about where's your vulnerability? It's about how can you identify your feelings and share them. When I'm working with a lesbian couple, it's about where's your assertion with each other? Where's your fierce intimacy? So unfortunately, just because you're a same-sex couple doesn't mean that you've escaped the net of your socialization. And you have to keep that in mind. Don't have fantasies about how it is. Learn from the couple that you're sitting with. Let them tell you how it is.
Beautiful, thank you.
So basically at the end of the day, though, hurt happened. Sometimes I lose it, even though if it seems unexpected and unreasonable, but sometimes I lose. So hurt is inevitable. Can you speak of repair? Can we go to the repair?
Yeah, it's a very specific process. If you're the one in a state of first of all, let me say this. Repair is a one-way street. Everybody gets this wrong. I'm sorry, Harville Hendricks, it is not a dialogue. It is a monologue. If your partner is in a state of disrepair, you have one goal: to help them move back into repair with you. That's your goal. This is not your time. You are at their service. They're the one who are asking you for help with their distress. This is not the time for you to talk about you or your distress or your explanations or your yes buts or any. I have a saying. When you're in the repair process, if you're dealing with an upset partner, it's like you're at the customer service window. You know the customer service window? Somebody comes up to you and goes, my microwave doesn't work, okay? They don't want to hear from you, well, my toaster doesn't work. They want you to fix their damn microwave. Once you tend to their issues, then they might have some interest in listening to you talk about yours. But if you talk about what the reality of the situation and how they got it wrong, your excuses for what you did and how they have to understand, or tit for tat, well, that's your issue with me, but I have this issue with, no, all of that goes. You are at their service. That's the first thing. That's for the listener. And for the speaker, remember love. Remember that you're speaking to make things better and you're talking to someone you care about. Somebody once said, wait, W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? Get your head on straight. Keep your eye on the prize, and then you can go in as that adult and air what you need to have aired. When you do speak, a couple of tips. One, start off with a negotiation. Don't pour dump. I have something on my mind. You could help me with it. Is this a good time?
So ask for permission. That's perhaps even the first one. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, are you ready for this? And that helps the other person not feel like a big victim. You know, they've agreed to it. So it helps them be more adult in the conversation. Tip 2, find something to appreciate. Don't lead with the negative, lead with the positive. Even if it's just, I appreciate you being willing to sit and listen to me. Cherish your partner and the relationship before you launch into the distress. Then when you do speak, speak from the I. This was my experience of what happened. These are my feelings, and this all-important final step, this is what I would like that would help me feel better right now. Give them an opportunity to repair with you. Don't just vent about what they've done wrong. Give them an opening to make it right. We do this with children. If you're disciplining a child, you always have a strategy that they can come back into the community and be citizens of good standing. But we don't do it as adults. It's just, and you have to listen. Now it's, and this is what you could do to help me feel better. That's the speaker. Let me finish the whole thing. If you're the listener, you listen with generosity. You listen with a generous heart. Don't be defensive. Don't reference objective reality. Stay compassionate to your partner's experience and do what you can to help them feel better. Get your ego out of the door and be a generous gentlewoman or gentleman. Be generous in your heart. Your partner's in distress. Give them as much as you can of what they're asking for. Acknowledge as much as you can of what they're criticizing you for. Yes, I did do that. Not yes, but. Yes, I did it. I'm sorry. Here's what I would like to give you now. That's the repair process.
Thank you. And would you say there is a place also to own something, to kind of cope up with, just say, this was my part, now I see that. Since a conflict
The
usually
speaker, what I want most from the speaker is less a tally of what I did and what you did, And more of this. This is a beautiful, I call this the golden rule of relationship. So you're upset, you go to Mauricio, you speak your mind, you give him something that would help you feel better. Please don't abandon me like that. If you're not going to be here, please at least let me know. There are two things he has to do. Acknowledge what he did. You know what? I was an hour late and I never called you. That was selfish of me. And then give the lady or the man what they're asking for. From now on, I will really work hard not to do that to you. That's your job. Now, then, this is the advanced course. Then I have the speaker say this. What could I do, Mauricio, to help you do that? What could I do to help you come through for me? I call this helping him win, helping him succeed. You want him to succeed because success means he gives you what you're asking for. So how can I empower my partner to come through for me in the ways I want them to? That's my focus, not, yeah, you did this and I want to admit I did that. Fine. But more important is this, how can I help you do this? That's the next step.
Wow.
Wow, thank you, Terry. This has been so rich, and my only fear is that it's been very much connected to people in a relationship, and many people at this time are alone at home. So I would like to open for some questions, and hopefully we hear questions from people.
That's marvelous. May I just say one sentence?
Yes.
There's no such thing as alone. You have a relationship with someone, your kid, your parents, your dog, the guy down the street. We're all in relationship, and all of these skills are true for all of the relationships, not just heterosexuals and not just sexual, but every relationship. Just wanted to say that.
Beautiful, thank you. Very important. So let's take some questions. Hold on one second. We have Boaz. We will unmute you now. Boaz.
Hi. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah, I first of all, thank you. This has been very to the point. I was wondering if, Terry, if you could speak a bit more about one, exactly people who are like maybe separating or in like not with a traditional couple in these times. And specifically also if you could say something about how you see from your practice maybe in these times how codependent patterns play out in relationships, which we all have to some extent or another, and also how this might impact non-traditional relationships, so like non-monogamous, romantic, heterosexual, normal quote-unquote relationships, but things that are a bit more complex maybe.
Okay, so
these times.
Boris, those are three questions, and each one of them is complicated. So let me see if I can even remember the first one. First of all, if you're separating or you're alone in this horrible time, one of the things I would like you to focus on is that primary relationship, which is the one between you and you. And this is a good time to work on yourself. So what we call self-esteem is really a relationship. How am I treating me? And a lot of us, if I held up a stethoscope to your brain, your psyche, I would hear a part of you being pretty harsh to other parts of you. And so I want you to work on your own relationship. Our brains have a negative bias. Left to ourselves, we have a harder time staying in equilibrium. We co-regulate one another. That's why solitary confinement is so cruel. People go mad without that. So you may not be in a intimate sexual relationship right now, but Zoom your friends, Zoom your buddies, Zoom your family, And particularly with men, I want men to have deeper conversations with their friends, with other men, real heart to hearts. You initiate that. You go a little deeper and share a few feelings. And this friend may not want to hear it and go back to sports, but this friend will reciprocate and tell you more about their hearts. And the whole thing gets deeper. So rely on other relationships and deepen those relationships. A lot of men will only show their hearts to their primary partner. And I want you to show your heart to more people than that. In terms of, this is a horrible time to date. Obviously, we're all Zoom dating at this point, unless you're out of seclusion. Stay connected to the person that you're. If you have a new love or a new interest, or you're trying something out, stay connected. Take your time. I don't know. I talk to people about, I'm a big fan of phone sex or maybe Zoom sex these days. Find creative ways to be intimate with the people in your life. And loneliness is a killer. Loneliness will physically harm you. And so take that seriously and reach out. But don't put all your eggs in the basket of one primary relationship. Spread it out. You have other people who care for you, and let them in.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Boaz. Thank you, Terry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please raise your hands if you have a question.
That's
It's really
right.
complicated for us to follow the chat, read, and we want to make sure you have a camera, because we like to see the people when they ask the question. And as we said, we like to give privilege to people who has not asked yet. So we want to hear every voice in the circle. Please do so. Like Zachary appear now.
And also Harry. Okay, let's go for Zachary.
Zachary.
Unmute. You're
Zachary,
unmuted.
you're unmuted.
Hello. So yeah, I've been following in the chat and how we work with all of these complexities, with starting with being binary with the gender thing. And I understand a lot of people have been saying that we're talking this from a certain lens. And so how would you approach these types of things coming in? So my partner and I'm born a male. He was born a female. Friends throughout high school. We're in relationships in high school. Then we're friends for a while. And then Kayla transitioned to Camden, and now I'm queer and gender fluid myself. And now 3 years later, we have a lot of, harsh history that we need to try and set aside, work out, and come through. And there's just so many layers to all this stuff because there's been so many gender aspects to it. So how do we approach this stuff coming in off the bat, unpacking the fact that you are not a man and you are not a woman, and this is not how this is going to work because we are both so much of everything within ourselves.
Here's what go on, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think that's one thing that was expressed in the chat that was kind of missing from the conversation. I think I did a good job of summing up everybody's kind of questions around all of that.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're on with me. A couple of things. First of all, the other word that I would use if I were you for gender fluid would be whole and healthy. Let me say that again.
Oh, yeah.
Let me say that again. You see, what patriarchy does is it splits us down the middle. And it calls half of our human qualities feminine and half of our human qualities masculine. And little boys and little girls are corralled into those ghettos. And if you are, as you speak, gender fluid, your partner has been through transition, you are not in that ghetto. Good for you. You're a pioneer. You're forging a new path. You don't have a lot of maps, you don't have a lot of guidance, and you don't have a lot of rituals. So there's a lot that you're making up as you go along. I would want you to be in community with other people who are sharing those choices and those dilemmas. And I would not have prejudice within the relationship, expecting this or that from one another. If you're going to be free, be free. You have to really be skilled. You have to really master the art of repair and fierce intimacy. You have to tell each other the truth. You know, Bob Dylan wrote, to live outside the law, you must be honest. And you must be honest with each other. And you have to have some compassion for yourselves and each other. Not that you're big victims, but the world at large is not welcoming you. You are not a blessed couple. And in many areas and for many people, you will be a cursed couple. And you have to lean into that oppression and deal with it. Talk about it. Talk about the hurts that you've encountered. Talk about the ways in which you've internalized some of those voices and inflicted them on one another. You're not completely clear. And then the second is community and support. The group, the larger culture does not support you. And so you build a Zachary cherishing culture around you. And see about having some rituals. Have a celebration of your relationship. Have an anniversary of your first date. Do some of the things that heteronormative people do to solidify the relationship and give it some sense of more solidity and substance. And then be proud. Be proud. That's some of my advice. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, it sits well. I do agree. I just, yeah. I just through this whole thing was just thinking about how there's just so many layers and intricacies to it. But yeah, that sat well. Thank you.
You know, it gets a little simpler if you stop thinking about masculine and feminine and you just think of yourselves as whole human beings.
Sure, yeah, I agree, because there's no way, because you end up being a third masculine for a second, a third feminine for a second, and then you're doing this little inchworm thing the whole time. So yeah, I agree with that.
All right, great. Nice talking to you.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Zachary.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Zachary. Thank you so much.
Susan, you are unmuted.
Am I? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you both for being so vulnerable and being the guinea pigs here so we can all learn. So thank you, Zaya and Maurizio. So Terry, I'm taking your evolutionary class.
Oh, how do you like it?
I love it. And my partner said, well, you learn for both of us. And I said, well, I don't know. You can do a little work too. But here's my question. In this distance relationship I have, you brought up, and I think it might help other people here, but could you elaborate on what you mentioned in one of your classes about, imagined negative image. So when your partner, or could be your parent or whoever is far away, as much as you love them, there's a tendency at times, perhaps you're triggered or whatever, that we've got a negative image. It just pops up and there it is. I don't know, not always sure the source.
Well, the source will be your trauma 9 times out of 10, and your adaptation to the trauma. So, you know, I'm dealing with a surgeon who comes back from the hospital every day, and his male, he's gay, his male partner is freaked out about contagion and says, look, take a shower and change your clothes before you come in. And the surgeon says, don't control me like that. Okay, this is fish in a barrel. Excuse me, Mr. Surgeon, tell me who tried to control you growing up as a child. One of the things I say is there's no such thing as overreacting. It's just that what you're reacting to may not be in the present. So we have this thing I call a core negative image. I'd like to invite, if I may, everybody to my website, terryreal.com. I have a ton of material, a free class with Thomas together. Anyway, I write about this. Core negative image is a blessing because on the one hand, it's like I call it seeing your partner through the wrong end of a telescope. It's totally me and you and adversarial. But the blessing is it's always the same cluster of images. It's not like a mutating virus. My wife has a core negative image of me as being a narcissistic, unreliable, charming, selfish boy.
Yep.
Now, I think it shows how messed up she is that she could even think that of me, but that is what you think. When your partner is core negative image triggered, and they start treating you in that exaggerated negative way, all of us respond to the exaggeration and start defending ourselves, start correcting ourselves. The other thing is we get core negative image triggered the minute they start treating us that way. So I have an image of my wife as being an unappreciative, insatiable, demanding, critical witch, right? So she says to me, Terry, you did blah, 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 because, and she's not very kind about it because she's core negative image triggered. And I immediately go into my negative image of her, and the two are at each other. At this point, Susan, I like to say the two people can sit down and have a beer. You're not even in the fight. Your core negative images are fighting with each other. So the key is this. Instead of pulling against it, lean into it. You're right. You're right. I can be like that sometimes. And you know what? I teach people all the time. If your partner is saying something and their delivery sucks, duck under the sucky delivery and try and listen to what they're trying to say. Sure. Instead of reacting, hi honey, I'm teaching. Okay, instead of reacting to what they're saying. Hey B, would you do me a favor and close the door? Thanks, honey. So try not to meet reactivity with reactivity. This is a very adult skill. I call it meeting aggression with vulnerability. Baring your neck to the fangs. This is a good spot right here. Let's take that one. And as best you can, for the most part, if your partner's coming at you through their CNI, duck under it by paying attention to their distress and being compassionate to their experience. If that doesn't work, take a break. If that doesn't work, stand up to them with love. If they're bullies, stand up to them. And if nothing works, that means it's time to get into people's therapy and get some help.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Terry. So basically, in a nutshell, you now I know why I was so attuned to you when we first met. You're basically, you're me and she. We are. I mean, you describe my life.
Our negative.
Exactly. It was like she talking about me talking about. Okay.
My goal in this interview, Mauricio, was to make you cry. Every time we meet, I want to make you cry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
well, I just want to say that it really, what it boils down, being in a relationship is, at least for me, has been the hardest spiritual practice.
I think it is a spirit. That's what the course with Thomas is called, Evolutionary Relationships. And we're talking about bringing your spiritual practice into your relationships and also using your relationships to evolve yourself. You know, one of the things, Belinda and I might look at each other at one point and either of us could say to the other, thank you for giving me this opportunity to work on myself.
Yeah, that's what I usually tell Mauricio, you're my greatest teacher. Thank you. Thank you.
So once in a while I get a compliment.
Oh boy. I'm sure not nearly as much as you deserve, but there we are.
Oh my God, Terry, it's really spectacular. I mean, you went through, oh God, it's a manual that should be given at birth or at teenager years, to every human being. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah,
thank you.
very
You're
much.
wonderful people. It's fun to be in your presence.
Likewise.
Thank you.
And we have posted the links to your course in the chat and your website, Lisa, if you may post those again. And
we hope to get more of you on our community, to work more with you and have more chances to.
We've been getting this feedback. Of course, in an hour interview, we cannot touch on all the complexities of to be in relationship at this time, in this culture, with this socio-economical race, all of that. So yes, we do.
You're
I
very
just
well
want to
aware,
make that
very well aware that there
disclaimer. We have not touched in any of those, and we're aware. We hope to continue and have more time, maybe in depth, to go into more of these nuances.
Yeah, so beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, listen, I am in relationship with the two of you. We're in this for the long haul, and you've got me as much as you want me. So we'll be talking.
Thank you. Thank you.